The combat doctrine demonstrations began on a Monday, and the Kesari went first, because of course they did. Torvon walked into the arena, like a warship entering harbor. All mass, all intent, no apology. The arena was the largest enclosed space on Ganymede Station, a circular pit, 50 meters across, with observation galleries running 3 tiers high. The floor was reinforced composite, rated for heavy vehicle traffic. The walls were layered shock-absorbent plating, designed to take punishment from every species in the coalition. The Kesari treated it like a playground. 6 of them took the floor, Torvon in the center. They moved through the Kesari combat forms the way a river moves through rock, not around it, through it. Forearm strike combinations that came so fast, the recording drones had to switch to high-speed capture just to track them. The sound alone was enough to make the Velith cadets flinch. Each blow landed on training targets with a crack that echoed off the walls and settled in the chest like a second heartbeat. Torvon finished the demonstration with a display strike. He squared up to the reinforced training wall, a slab of composite 3 inches thick and bolted to the arena frame. Pulled his upper right arm back and hit it. The wall dented, not cracked, dented. The metal bent inward around his fist like something soft. The galleries erupted. Cadets from 9 species made whatever noise their biology used for being impressed. The HFY clicked so fast, it sounded like rain. Torvon stepped back from the wall and shook out his hand, not because it hurt, but because that was how you ended the form. He looked up at the observation gallery. Specifically, he looked at the section where the humans sat. Lena Cook was there. She had a paper notebook open on her knee and a pen in her right hand. Not a stylus, not a datapad. A pen. The kind with ink inside it. The kind that had been outdated on Earth for 100 years, and outdated everywhere else for 500. She was writing something. She did not look up. Torvon held his gaze on her for 3 full seconds. She kept writing. He walked off the arena floor, and something in his jaw tightened that he did not fully understand. The other species followed over the next several days. The Torani demonstrated their grappling doctrine, a ground-based system built around joint locks and pressure holds that used their low center of gravity as an anchor. Once a Torani got a hold on you, removing them required either extreme force or the willingness to leave that limb behind. They were not flashy. They were patient. They grabbed, they held, they squeezed, and eventually the thing they were holding stopped resisting. 3 Kesari cadets tried the escape drills, and all 3 tapped out within 30 seconds. The Torani instructor showed no expression during this. He didn't need to. The Velith were different. Silly was not the demonstrator. That was a senior Velith cadet named Pale, who moved like water given a nervous system. The Velith combat doctrine was built on prediction. They read microsignals in an opponent's body, the tensing of a muscle group a half second before a strike, the shift of weight that telegraphed a direction change, the involuntary dilation patterns that signaled commitment to an action. Then they moved before the attack arrived. Pale stood in the center of the arena, while 3 cadets attacked him simultaneously. He didn't block anything. He was simply never where the hits were going. He flowed between fists and kicks and grapple attempts like they were furniture in a room he had memorized, sliding through gaps that didn't seem to exist until he was already through them. It was beautiful. It was also, Silly knew, limited. A Velith could dodge forever. They couldn't finish anything. Their doctrine was the art of never being hit, which was wonderful right up to the moment when you needed to hit back. Each species had a philosophy. The Kesari said, be the strongest thing in the room. The Torani said, be the most patient. The Velith said, be the most aware. The HFY said, be the most numerous. Each philosophy was clear, refined, and absolute in its conviction that it had solved the fundamental problem of violence. Lena watched them all. She sat in the same seat in the observation gallery for every demonstration, and she wrote in her paper notebook with her ink pen, and she never once reacted visibly to anything she saw. The Kasari dented walls, she wrote. The Tirani locked joints until the training mats compressed, she wrote. The Velith dodged like they could see the future, she wrote. Nico Garza, meanwhile, ran the human cadets through conditioning drills in a side gym that nobody else was using. The sessions were not classified. They were not even interesting to watch. Pull-ups, sprints, groundwork, rolling, falling, getting up, falling again. Basic stuff. The kind of training that showed up in those funny videos the aliens had laughed at. A few alien cadets wandered in to observe, mostly out of curiosity, the way you might visit a museum exhibit about an ancient civilization. Then, the Kasari who liked replaying push-up videos leaned in the doorway with his lower arms crossed and watched Nico drill the two other human cadets through a sequence that was, by Kasari standards, sad. Bodyweight exercises. No impact training. No armor. No weapons. Why don't your people wear plating? Ven asked. It was a genuine question. He wasn't mocking. He had moved past mocking and arrived at something like confused pity. You have no natural defense. Surely you have developed external armor by now. Nico finished a set of pull-ups, dropped to the floor, and wiped his face with his shirt. We have armor, he said, for when we need it. This isn't about armor. Then what is it about? Nico considered this. He had a way of considering things that looked lazy. His eyes drifted, his posture loosened, like the question was a hammock he was settling into. But the answer came out sharp. We break different, he said. Ven waited for an explanation. One did not come. Nico went back to his pull-ups, and Ven stood in the doorway for another few minutes, trying to parse a sentence that had only 3 words in it, and somehow not enough room for him to fit inside its meaning. Thursday. Cafeteria. The station served food for 11 species, which meant the cafeteria smelled like 11 different arguments about what food was. Lena sat alone at a corner table with a tray of something brown and a cup of something black. She ate the way she did everything else, efficiently, without ceremony, like the food was a task and she was completing it. Silly sat down across from her. Lena looked up. Her eyes were dark and flat and gave away exactly nothing. She did not seem surprised. She did not seem anything. I have a question, Silly said. Okay. What is Earth's combat doctrine called? Lena chewed, swallowed, thought about it for a moment that lasted slightly longer than the question seemed to deserve. Doesn't really have one name, she said. Depends on what's trying to kill you. That is not a doctrine. That is an absence of doctrine. If you say so. Silly's bioluminescence shifted, a subtle thing, a deepening along the lines of her jaw. I read your file, she said. What was available of it? Not much available. Cygnus 4. Velden Reach. Lena's hand, the left one, the one with a scar that ran along the ridge from knuckle to wrist like a river on a map, went flat on the table. Not a fist. Flat. Pressed down, like she was holding the table in place, or holding herself. What was trying to kill you on Cygnus 4? Silly asked. The cafeteria hummed around them. 11 species eating 11 different meals, and none of them paying attention to the small human woman and the tall Velith diplomat sitting across from each other at a corner table. Tuesday, Lena said. She picked up her tray. She left. She did not look back. Silly sat with the word for a long time. Tuesday, a day of the week, the human unit for a rotation of their home planet. It should have meant nothing. It meant everything. It meant the threat was not special, not a battle, not a siege, not an enemy with a name. Just a day, an ordinary day that had teeth in it. Silly's bioluminescence went dark. All of it. Every marking on her body shut off at once. which was the Velith equivalent of a sharp intake of breath, and she sat in the cafeteria with her own light gone out and understood for the first time that she was not afraid of Lena Cook. She was afraid of whatever had made her. That night, in his private office on the upper level of the administrative ring, Commandant Drayle opened a file on his display. Not the redacted version that lived in the Academy database. The real one. The one with his clearance code and his alone. He read it for the 9th time since Lena Cook had arrived at his station. He did not read it because he had forgotten what it said. He read it because every time he read it, he hoped it would say something different. It did not. He closed the file, sat in the dark. The station hummed around him, full of cadets sleeping in their bunks, dreaming whatever their species dreamed about. Then he opened a comm channel to the arena maintenance crew. "Reinforce the floor," he said. "Priority." The crew chief asked why. Drell did not answer the question. He repeated the order and closed the channel and sat in the dark a while longer. And then he went to bed and did not sleep well. Lena walked into the arena on Monday morning, wearing standard training clothes and carrying nothing. No armor, no pads, no weapon, no shield, no device of any kind. She walked to the center of the floor, the newly reinforced floor, though the cadets didn't know it was new, and stood there with her hands at her sides and her weight balanced and her eyes scanning the galleries the way a lighthouse scans the sea. Slow, steady, missing nothing. The galleries were full. Word had spread through the barracks over the weekend that the human module was starting, and every species had turned up. Some came to learn. Most came to be entertained. The Kasari sat in a group on the upper tier, their massive frames making the gallery seats look like furniture for children. Torvan was in the center of them, arms folded, all four, and his expression carried the polite neutrality of someone who had already decided this would be unimpressive, but was willing to be civil about it. Silly sat in the front row, alone. Her bioluminescence was running a slow cycle of colors that she couldn't seem to control, which annoyed her. Lena looked at the assembled cadets. She did not greet them. She did not introduce herself. She did not give a speech about Earth, or humanity, or the proud traditions of human combat. She said 5 words. "I need a volunteer. Big one." Torvan stood before the sentence finished. He didn't think about it. A Kasari warrior does not think about answering a challenge any more than water thinks about running downhill. He vaulted the gallery railing, a drop of 12 feet that he landed like a step off a curb, and walked to the center of the arena. He stood in front of Lena Cook. The top of her head reached his chest. His shadow covered her completely. One of his arms was thicker than both of her legs together. "Hit me," she said. Torvan looked at her. "Hit me," she said again. He threw a strike, controlled, fast, because he was Kasari, and fast was their slow. But pulled, he was not a fool, and killing the instructor on the first day would create paperwork. His upper right fist cut through the air at a speed that would have turned a training dummy into components. It hit nothing. Lena was 2 inches to the left. Not dodging, that was the wrong word for it. She hadn't moved the way the Velith moved, flowing and dramatic and readable. She had just shifted. A tiny adjustment, the kind of thing you might do to let someone pass you in a hallway. His fist went through the space where her head had been and kept going. And she was right there, right next to the path of the strike, close enough that the displaced air moved her hair. The arena went quiet. "Again," she said. He swung. Upper left this time, a crossing blow that covered more space. It hit air. She was 2 inches the other way. He hadn't seen her move. He had been watching her, and he hadn't seen it. He threw 2 more, fast, committed, the kind of combination that had cracked arena walls during the Kasari demonstration. 4 strikes, 4 misses. Lena Cook had not moved her feet. She was standing in exactly the same spot she had been standing in when she said hit me, and Torvon, 800 pounds of apex predator, had not touched her. The silence in the arena was thick enough to stand on. Lena stepped back. Okay, she said. Sit down. Thanks. Torvon did not sit down. He stood there, his forearms at his sides, and something rearranged itself behind his eyes. Not anger, not embarrassment. Something older and deeper than both. The recalibration of a predator who has just discovered that the thing it classified as harmless is not. He walked back to the gallery and sat down and did not fold his arms. Here is what I am not going to teach you, Lena said, addressing the full arena. Her voice was flat, unraised, and carried to every row. I am not going to teach you how to punch harder. If you're Kesari, you already punch hard enough to kill most things. I'm not going to teach you how to dodge. The Velith already dodged better than any human who ever lived. I'm not going to teach you how to grapple, because the Tyranni have that locked down. She paused. What I'm going to teach you is how to break things. She raised her hand, and a holographic display lit up behind her. A full anatomical projection of a Kesari body, rotating slowly, every bone and joint and muscle group labeled. Every species in this room has a body, she said. Every body has architecture, and every architecture has a failure point. A place where the design compromises, where the engineers, evolution, God, whatever you want to call it, had to make a trade-off. She pointed at the Kesari projection. Her finger landed on the junction beneath the second arm, the point where the upper and lower arm nerve clusters crossed. The Kesari exoskeleton is incredible. Best natural armor in the coalition. But it has a flex gap, right here, under the second arm, where the plates have to separate to allow full range of motion. The gap is about 2 inches wide during a strike extension. That's enough. She switched the display. A Velith body now. Velith predictive evasion reads microsignals in the opponent's body to pre-dodge. Fastest reaction processing in known space. But it can be overloaded. She tapped the display. If you throw enough feints, not real strikes, just commitment signals, a Velith system can't distinguish real from false fast enough. 6 feints in 2 seconds creates a half-second blind window. Half a second is enough. The Velith cadets shifted in their seats. Silly's bioluminescence went flat white. Lena went through every species in the room. The Tyranni grapple relies on ground contact. Remove the ground, remove the grapple. The Rethki swarm coordination uses pheromone signals that disperse in high wind. Every species, every body, every door that didn't lock. She didn't present this with cruelty. She presented it the way a mechanic presents engine diagnostics. Here is how the machine works, and here is where the machine fails. It was so calm, it was almost kind. And it was the most terrifying thing most of the cadets had ever sat through. Human combat doctrine doesn't have a name, Lena said, because it isn't one thing. It's a system for identifying what you're fighting and finding the fastest path to its failure point. We are not the strongest species. We are not the fastest, or the toughest, or the most numerous. We are the species that spent 300,000 years figuring out how everything else dies. Training began the next day, and it was nothing like the videos. Lena didn't teach techniques. She taught principles. How to fall without breaking. Not a Kesari fall, not a Velith tumble, but the human kind, where you expected the ground to hurt, and you practiced hitting it until it didn't stop you anymore. How to redirect force, not blocking, which required being stronger than the incoming blow, but channeling, turning the opponent's energy into movement you controlled. How to keep fighting when something was broken, not a hypothetical, a specific curriculum for operating with a fractured arm, a dislocated shoulder, cracked ribs, impaired vision. Your body will fail you, Lena said during one of these sessions. She said it the way someone else might say, the sun comes up. Parts of it will stop working during a fight. That is not the end of the fight. That is the middle of it. The end is when you decide it's over. A Kesari cadet named Ren dislocated a training dummy's arm mount during a drill, and looked at Lena with the expression of someone expecting praise. "Good," Lena said. "Now do it when the dummy is trying to kill your friend, and there are 3 more behind it, and the gravity is failing, and you have 1 arm. Not clean arena duels. Ambushes in dark corridors, fights on uneven ground, engagements where the gravity shifted mid-combat, situations where the squad was outnumbered, and the mission was not, win the fight, but get your wounded to the exit alive." The cadets, who had been training in their species' doctrines since childhood, found themselves crawling through simulated rubble, dragging injured teammates, and making decisions with no good options, only less bad ones. It was exhausting. It was humbling. It was, several cadets admitted privately, the first training that had ever scared them. Late on Thursday evening, Nico found Torvald sitting alone in the observation gallery above the empty arena. The big Kesari was looking down at the floor where Lena had stood, where he had swung 4 times and hit nothing, and his face held an expression that Nico had never seen on a Kesari before. Doubt. Nico sat down next to him. The gallery bench creaked under Torvald's weight. It didn't creak under Nico's. They sat in the kind of silence that builds between 2 people who are not yet friends, but are no longer strangers. "Your species has no natural weapons," Torvald said. He did not look at Nico. "No armor, no venom, nothing. How did you become this?" Nico didn't answer right away. He leaned back. He looked at the arena floor. For once, he didn't have an apple. "Everything on our planet was trying to eat us," he said. "For about 300,000 years. Big cats, wolves, snakes, bears, sharks, diseases, weather, each other. Mostly each other toward the end. We had nothing. Soft skin, dull teeth, slow, weak compared to the things hunting us." He paused. "To watch an animal that was bigger and faster and meaner, and instead of running, ask, where does it break?" Torvald was quiet for a long time. "And cook?" Nico's easy posture didn't change. His voice did. Something behind it shifted, like a door closing in a distant room. "Lena's a different thing," he said. "She's what happens when we aim that at each other." The silence came back. They sat in it together, 2 species separated by 400 pounds and 300,000 years of divergent evolution, looking at an empty arena floor and thinking about the same small woman. In her bunk that night, Silly ran the numbers. Lena's evasion during the demonstration. The 4 dodges. Silly had watched them in real time, and then pulled the arena's recording drone footage and watched them again, frame by frame. She measured the distances, the timing, the angles. The reaction speed was not exceptional, not by Velith standards. A trained Velith could have dodged those strikes with room to spare. But that was not what made Silly's bioluminescence go dark again. It was the precision. Lena had not dodged far. She had dodged exactly far enough. 2 inches. Every time. Not 3, not 4, not the safe margin that any sane person would take when an 800-pound predator was swinging at their head. 2 inches. The minimum distance required to avoid contact. That kind of calibration did not come from training. Training got you close. Training got you to 4 inches, maybe 3. 2 inches, the razor gap between contact and clean miss, calculated in real time against an unfamiliar species. That came from one place only. Repetition. Thousands of repetitions. Against things that were genuinely trying to kill her. In situations where dodging 4 inches instead of 2 meant hitting a wall or a teammate, or moving into the path of something else that was coming for her. Lena Cook's body had learned geometry the only way a human body could learn it. By nearly dying. Over and over and over, until the margins got thin enough to live inside. Silly lay in her bunk, with every light on her body shut off, and stared at the ceiling, and thought about a word. Tuesday. Just a Tuesday. An ordinary day, on Cygnus 4. She wondered how many Tuesdays it took. The floor was still being repaired on Monday. Maintenance crews had pulled the shattered composite out and were layering new panels into the crater, while cadets ran morning drills around them, which gave the whole operation the energy of a construction site that had accidentally been built inside a gym. Nobody complained. The crater had become the most popular spot on the station. Cadets from every species found reasons to walk past it, to stand at its edge, to look down into the depression where 800 pounds of Kasari had met an idea about physics and lost. Someone had scratched something into the edge of the damaged floor in Kasari script. Silly translated it later. It said, "The wall learned to throw back." She didn't know who wrote it. She suspected it was Torvan. Graduation week arrived the way all endings arrive at military academies, with too much to do and not enough time to feel anything about it. The final combined exercise was a full-scale combat scenario. Mixed species squads running through a simulated urban environment with degrading conditions, simulated hostiles, shifting objectives, and all the chaos that Lena had been building toward in her training sessions. Squad 7 had Torvan, Nico, 2 Rethki, and a Velith navigator. On paper, it was a heavy assault squad. Torvan was the biggest thing on the field, and the Rethki pair worked like a precision swarm. The Velith handled threat detection. Nico was listed as support. In practice, Nico restructured the squad's approach during the first 60 seconds. He did it so quietly that Torvan didn't realize it had happened until they were already winning. Nico positioned Torvan at the front of their formation. Obvious, visible, the thing that every hostile targeted first, because he was the biggest threat in the room. While the simulated enemies focused their attention on 8 feet of Kesari warrior, Nico moved the Rethki pair through a ventilation route he had mapped during the pre-exercise walkthrough, brought them up behind the hostile position, and coordinated a strike that hit at the exact moment Torvan committed to a frontal push. The hostiles were pinned between the hammer and the anvil. Torvan's strength was the thing they couldn't ignore. The humans and Rethki were the thing they didn't see coming. The opposing squad surrendered in 4 minutes. Torvan stood in the cleared room afterward, breathing through the adrenaline, and looked at Nico. The human was leaning against a wall, relaxed, easy, like they had just finished a walk somewhere instead of a combat exercise. "You moved us," Torvan said. "Yep. You restructured the entire approach from the assigned plan." The assigned plan was fine. This was better. In Kesari doctrine, the strongest warrior led. Period. It was not debatable. But Nico had not led. He had positioned every member of the squad in the spot where their specific capability became the most dangerous version of itself. And he had done it while making Torvan feel like the leader the entire time. "This is what she teaches," Torvan said. It was not a question. Nico shrugged. "She teaches how things break. The rest is just knowing which tool to use where." Squad 12 had Silly. Silly, the diplomat. Silly the Velith, who had enrolled in combat training because her government required it, not because she wanted it. Silly, who had spent the entire semester watching and analyzing and running numbers and never once throwing a punch that mattered. Squad 12 lost its human member, a cadet named Drew Park, to a simulated injury in the 2nd minute, shrapnel hit from a breaching charge. The simulation marked him as immobilized. 1 arm. No mobility. Combat ineffective. Standard procedure was to leave a guard with the wounded and continue with reduced numbers. Silly didn't follow standard procedure. She looked at the tactical display on her wrist unit. She looked at the terrain. She looked at the 3 remaining squad members, 2 Tirani and a Kesari, and she made a decision that no Velith tactical officer had made in the history of the exercise. She advanced. Velith doctrine said evade, predict the threat, flow around it, survive. Silly threw Velith doctrine into the broken floor crater where it belonged, and pushed her squad forward into the hostile position. She used the Tyranni as anchor points, positioned them at choke points where their grappling doctrine turned narrow corridors into traps. She put the Kesari on a flanking route that used her predictive read of the hostile movement patterns to place him exactly where the enemy would retreat to when the Tyranni closed the front. Then, she walked into the middle of the engagement zone herself. No weapons. No combat training worth mentioning. A Velith diplomat in a war game, standing in the open. The hostiles targeted her. Of course they did. She was exposed, unarmored, easy. She dodged the first 3 shots using Velith prediction, flowed between them like Pale had in the demonstration weeks ago. But she wasn't dodging to survive. She was dodging to draw fire. Every shot aimed at her was a shot not aimed at her squad. Every hostile that turned toward the easy target turned away from the Tyranni closing in behind them. The exercise ended in 6 minutes. Squad 12 won. Silly stood in the aftermath, her bioluminescence cycling through colors so fast she looked like a signal fire, and her hands were shaking. And Drew Park was on the ground behind her, giving her a thumbs up with his one working arm. And the 2 Tyranni were staring at her like they had never seen a Velith before. They hadn't. Not like this. In the command center, Lena watched the feeds. 12 squads, dozens of engagements, mixed species teams doing things that no single species doctrine could have predicted. She watched Torvon become an anvil. She watched Nico become a strategist. She watched Silly become something that didn't have a name yet. She wrote something in her paper notebook. Her hand was relaxed. The scar side wasn't pressed against anything. Her pen moved easily across the page, and whatever she wrote it without the particular tension that Nico had learned to watch for. The tension that meant Lena was remembering instead of seeing. She was seeing. The debrief turned informal, the way military events always turn informal when the adrenaline has been replaced by relief and someone finds the snacks. Species mixed in the common area with an ease that hadn't existed at the start of the semester. Kesari sat next to Velith. Tyranni shared a table with Rethki. The rigid species clustering that had defined the first weeks was gone, replaced by something messier and louder and better. Torvon sat on the floor because the furniture situation hadn't improved, and it never would. Nico sat on the floor next to him, because that was what you did when your friend was too big for chairs. They ate from the same tray, which was a small thing that was also not small at all. A Kesari cadet approached Lena near the drink station. "Instructor Cook, would you consider running a weekend seminar on human close-quarters doctrine? Several of us have discussed it." Before Lena could answer, a Velith cadet joined the request, then a Tyranni, then 2 more Kesari, then a Rethki, clicking rapidly in a way that Silly translated as, "Me too, please." Lena stood with a cup of coffee in her hand and looked at the room. 11 species, cadets who had come to this station believing their doctrine was the doctrine, their species the apex, their way of fighting the only way that mattered. They were standing in front of a 5'6" woman from a wet rock in an unremarkable solar system, asking her to teach them how to break things. "Saturday," she said. 0600. Don't eat first. The graduation ceremony was held in the briefing hall where it had all started. Commandant Drell stood at the front, and he was not a man for long speeches, so he didn't give one. "You came here as representatives of your species," he said. "You're leaving as something else. The coalition does not need you to be the same. It needs you to be better together than you are apart. That is not a slogan. It is a survival strategy." He paused. Dismissed. Tyranni to the bone. After the ceremony, the hall filled with the noise of 100 cadets saying goodbye, and promising to stay in contact, and doing all the things that soldiers do when a chapter ends, and the next one hasn't started yet. Torvon found Lena outside the hall. She was standing in the corridor with her paper notebook under her arm, looking out a viewing port at the cold nothing of space, and for a moment she looked like what she was beneath the training, and the doctrine, and the scar. A 31-year-old woman standing at a window, tired in a way that didn't have anything to do with sleep. "Instructor Cook," Torvald said. She turned. He was 8 feet tall. She was 5'6". He had 4 arms, an exoskeletal plating, and a body built for war by a world that took war seriously. She had soft skin and dull teeth, and a notebook full of handwritten observations and a file that was mostly blacked out. "I told my cohort that Earth training looks easy," Torvald said. He spoke in the Kesari formal register again, but this time it wasn't about ceremony, it was about precision. He wanted every word to land exactly where he put it. "I was wrong. It is the hardest training at this academy. Not because of the techniques, because it requires a species to have survived everything first, to have been the weakest thing in every room and refuse to die, and then to turn that refusal into a science." He extended his upper right arm, palm open, fingers spread, the Kesari gesture of recognizing a warrior of equal standing. It was old, older than Kesari space travel, older than their cities, from back when they still fought each other on the plains, and the highest honor one warrior could give another was to say, "You are the same as me." It had never been offered to a human. Lena looked at his arm. She looked at him. She reached out and shook his hand, the human way, palm to palm, fingers wrapped, grip firm. Her hand disappeared inside his. He could have closed his fist and hidden it completely, but the grip was there, steady and direct, and the scar on her left hand was visible for a moment, a thin white line, catching the corridor light. "See you Saturday, Torvald." She walked away, paper notebook under her arm, pen behind her ear. 5'6", heading back toward the arena, probably, or the side gym, or wherever it was she went when she wasn't teaching a galaxy full of apex predators, that the scariest thing in the room was the small one who knew where everything broke. Nico leaned against the hallway wall. He had an apple. The man always had an apple. He had probably smuggled an entire orchard onto the station in his luggage. He watched Lena walk away. He watched Torvald stand in the corridor, looking at his own hand like the handshake was still happening in it. He grinned. Not because it was funny, because he knew what Saturday's session was. Lena had told him that morning while they were running laps around the station's outer ring, both of them breathing easy, both of them moving with the kind of settled calm that only lived in people who had already gone through the thing that was supposed to end them, and come out the other side still running. Saturday was grappling fundamentals. Torvald had 4 arms. Nico bit his apple and grinned wider, because Lena Cook was going to spend Saturday morning teaching the biggest warrior in the Galactic Coalition why having 4 arms meant having 4 things she could use against him. And Torvald was going to love every second of it. Torvald made his request on a Friday, in the arena, in front of everyone. He stood in the center of the floor, the reinforced floor, though he still didn't know about the reinforcement, and spoke in the Kesari formal register, which meant no contractions, no idiom, and the kind of blunt clarity that other species sometimes mistook for rudeness, but was really just a culture that thought decorating the truth was a form of cowardice. "Instructor Cook," he said, "I am requesting a full contact exhibition match, your doctrine against Kesari capability, no modifications, no safety restrictions beyond lethal force prohibitions. I make this request not from challenge, but from the need to understand." He meant it. That was the thing about Torvald. He was proud, but he was not a liar, not even to himself. 3 weeks of Lena's training had planted something in him that his pride kept trying to pull out and couldn't. He wanted to know. Lena stood at the edge of the arena floor. She was holding her paper notebook. Her pen was behind her ear. She looked at Torvald the way she looked at everything, with an assessment so thorough it felt like being read aloud. "Full contact means full contact," she said. "I'm not going to pull anything. and I need you to not pull anything either. If you hold back, this doesn't teach anyone anything. Something happened in Torvan's body that he did not consciously control. His lower arms shifted, a small movement, a repositioning from the relaxed hang to the ready position. It was a Kesari involuntary response, a reflex buried so deep in the species' neurology that it predated language. The lower arms only shifted like that in the presence of a perceived equal. Torvan had never done it around a human before. He did not correct it. I agree to your terms, he said. The arena was reconfigured within the hour, because apparently everyone on the station had been waiting for this. The observation galleries filled to capacity. Species that hadn't attended a training demonstration all semester packed themselves into the seats. 3 recording drones were positioned at different heights. The station's medical teams set up on the arena's edge, with equipment rated for both Kesari and human physiology, which meant they basically brought 2 completely separate hospitals. Silly sat in the front row. Her bioluminescence was locked on a single color, a deep, saturated violet that her species associated with fear for someone you cared about. She had been cycling through options all morning, trying to shift it to something more neutral. But her body was not listening to her brain. The violet stayed. She realized, sitting there, that she did not know which fighter she was afraid for. Nico Garza stood at the arena's edge, safety officer. He had a medical kit at his feet, but his eyes were on Lena, not Torvan. He was standing with his weight on his toes, his hands loose, his jaw set in a way that didn't match the casual lean of his body. He looked like a man who knew exactly what was about to happen, and had opinions about it that he was keeping to himself. In the upper gallery, a door opened. Commandant Drail walked in and sat down. Cadets noticed. Drail had not attended a training demonstration in 6 years. He sat in the center of the upper tier, alone, and his face held the expression of a man watching something he had set in motion a long time ago arrive at its conclusion. Lena and Torvan took the floor. The size difference was the first thing. It was always the first thing. Torvan filled the space, the way a weather system fills the sky. You couldn't look at anything else. 8 feet, 4 arms, exoskeletal plating glinting under the arena lights. Every line of his body was a statement about what force meant. Lena stood across from him. 5'6", cropped hair, hands at her sides, no stance, no posture, no guard position. She looked like someone waiting for a bus. A Kesari cadet in the gallery whispered to his neighbor, "This will be over quickly." He was right. He was just wrong about which direction. The signal came. Torvan moved. Kesari combat doctrine opened with overwhelming force, a 4-armed combination designed to saturate the opponent's defense with more incoming threats than any single body could process. Upper arms striking high, lower arms striking mid, each blow arriving from a different angle at a different speed. The whole sequence designed to create a cage of impact that the target couldn't escape. Lena escaped it. She moved between the strikes like they were slow, which they were not. She redirected one, sidestepped another, ducked a third, and let the fourth pass over her shoulder, close enough to feel the heat of displaced air. She gave ground, backed up, moved laterally. To the untrained eye, she was losing. Silly's eyes were very trained. She watched Lena's footwork and felt her bioluminescence shift to something beyond violet. Lena was not retreating. Every step, every dodge, every redirect was a measurement. She was gathering information. Each time Torvan struck, she learned something. How his weight transferred between his upper and lower arms, which shoulder led when he committed to a power blow, how long the gap was between his neural signal reaching his upper arms versus his lower ones. She was not fighting him. She was learning the grammar of how he broke. 30 seconds in, Torvan hadn't landed a clean hit. He knew it. The gallery knew it. He shifted doctrines, moved from striking to grappling, using his forearms and his mass to close the distance and control the fight the way the Torani had taught in their demonstration. Get a hold. Use the weight. End it. He closed on her. 4 arms reached. 2 grabbed her torso. 2 locked around her arms. He had her. Pinned, secured. 4 Kasari arms wrapped around a human body that weighed less than one of his legs. By every combat metric in the Galactic Coalition's database, the fight was over. A Kasari in the gallery started to cheer, then stopped. Because something was wrong. Lena didn't struggle. She didn't fight the hold. She didn't strain against 800 pounds of armored muscle. She went still. Not limp. Still. There was a difference, and every predator species in the room felt it at the same time, in the same place, in whatever part of their biology remembered what it was like to hunt things that hunted back. Torvon felt her body relax inside his grip. He felt the tension leave her muscles. And the oldest part of his brain, the part that predated civilization and language and tool use, the part that was still standing on the plains of the Kesserai homeworld, watching the grass for things that wanted to eat him. That part sent a signal up his spine that translated roughly into a single word. Run. Lena moved. 3 shifts. That was all. 3 small, precise adjustments that happened so fast the recording drones needed frame-by-frame analysis to catch them later. The first shift exploited the flex gap under his second arm, the 2-inch opening in the exoskeletal plating that Lena had shown the cadets during the first week. She didn't strike it. She positioned her elbow against it, like a key entering a lock. The second shift redirected Torvon's own grip tension into a lateral torque along his left side, the side she had spent 30 seconds of evasion mapping, learning exactly how his weight distributed when his upper and lower arms were both engaged. The third shift targeted the half-second delay between his upper and lower arm neural signals. The delay was almost nothing. Almost. She moved during that half-second the way other people moved during hours, and she turned Torvon's upper arms into levers against his lower arms, his own strength pulling in 2 directions at once. She didn't break the hold. She made the hold break him. Torvon's grip became the force that lifted him off his feet. His own mass became the weight that took him down. 800 pounds of Kasari warrior, redirected through a single structural failure point, identified in 3 seconds of being held, slammed into the arena floor, with the full force of his own body turned against itself. The floor shattered, not cracked, not dented the way the training wall had dented under Torvon's display strike. Shattered. The reinforced composite, the composite that Drell had ordered strengthened just days ago, broke apart in a circle around Torvon's impact point like glass hit with a hammer. Shards of flooring sprayed outward. The sound was enormous. A deep structural boom that the cadets felt in their ribs. The arena went silent. Torvon lay in the crater, not hurt. His exoskeleton had done its job. The impact that shattered the floor had barely bruised him. He lay on his back, in a ring of broken composite, and stared at the ceiling, and tried to understand what had just happened to him. Lena stood at the edge of the crater. She was breathing hard. Her chest rose and fell in the deep, unsteady rhythm of a body that had just done something at the very edge of its limits. She was human. She was 5'6". She had just redirected 800 pounds of apex predator into the ground, using 3 movements that lasted less than a second combined. She was not undamaged. Her left shoulder sat wrong, pulled forward and slightly down, displaced from its socket. She did not look at it. She stood with her hands at her sides, and her weight balanced, and her eyes on Torvon, and she breathed, and she waited. The silence held for 5 seconds. 10. Torvon started laughing. It came from deep in his chest, rolled up through his forearms, and filled the arena. Full, shaking, genuine laughter. the kind that came from a place beyond pride, beyond doctrine, beyond the careful rankings that every species carried in their blood. He lay in his crater of broken floor, and he laughed until the sound of it bounced off the walls and came back to him. Again, he said. The arena erupted. Lena did not smile. She didn't, but something shifted around her eyes, a loosening so small that only two people in the arena caught it. Nico, who knew her, and Silly, who watched everything. In the upper gallery, after the arena had cleared and the medical team had reset Lena's shoulder, and the maintenance crew had begun sweeping up the remains of the floor, Commandant Drail sat alone. He played the recording on his datapad. Not the throw, not the impact, not the crater or the laughter or the eruption. He replayed the 2 seconds before the throw, when Lena went still in Torvon's grip. He had seen that stillness before, in the unredacted file, in helmet cam footage from Cygnus 4. Corporal Lena Cook, sole survivor of a 12-person fire team, pinned under collapsed structure debris, enemy contacts closing from 3 directions. She went still exactly like that. The same absence of tension, the same quiet. Then she moved. The helmet cam footage ran for 11 more hours after that moment. 11 hours of continuous combat. On a planet where the Coalition had sent 12 people and gotten 1 back. The file didn't say how many enemy contacts were in the area of operations when the engagement started. It said how many they found afterward, when the extraction team finally arrived and walked the site and counted. Drell closed the replay. He pressed his hand flat on the desk. The same gesture, the same pressure, the same need to hold something solid. He left the number out of his thoughts. It didn't help anyone to think about it. Not the cadets, not the Coalition, not the small woman with the wrong shoulder, who had just shattered an arena floor with someone else's body and hadn't smiled once. He shut off the display. He went home. He did not sleep well. He hadn't slept well since he read the file for the first time, and he suspected he wouldn't again for a while. Some numbers were like that. They stayed in the room after you turned off the lights. The shuttle doors opened, and Torvon stepped onto Ganymede Station like he owned the floor beneath him. He nearly did. 8 feet of bone-plated muscle, forearms folded behind his back in the Kasari posture of restrained authority, and a jaw wide enough to bite through cable housing. The corridor groaned under his weight. Actual groaning. The metal floor panels flexed and popped as he walked, and the cadets already gathered in the arrival bay pressed themselves against the walls to let him pass. Not out of politeness. Out of physics. Behind him, 6 more Kesari filed through. Each one was built along the same brutal lines. Exoskeletal ridges running from shoulder to spine, skin the color of gunmetal, and eyes set deep in skulls that looked like they were designed by someone who hated the concept of vulnerability. They moved with the easy confidence of a species that had never once, in its entire evolutionary history, been prey. Torvon scanned the arrival bay. 11 species. He cataloged them the way his blood told him to, by threat. The Taurani were thick and low to the ground, built for grappling, respectable. The Velith were tall and thin, bioluminescent patches glowing along their necks, and they watched everything with eyes that tracked too fast. Predators of a different kind. The insectoid Rethki clicked and shuffled in a group, dangerous in numbers. Then there were the humans. 3 of them, standing near the far wall like they had wandered into the wrong building and decided to stay anyway. They were small. Not Velith thin or Rethki fragile. Just small in the way that made you wonder how their species had survived long enough to build a shuttle. No armor plating, no claws, no venom sacs, no bioluminescence. Just skin and teeth that couldn't crack a nutshell. One of them, tall for a human, which still put him a full 2 feet below Torvon, was leaning against the wall, eating a piece of fruit. Red, round. He bit into it with a crunch that was somehow the loudest sound in the bay. Nico Garza chewed his apple, and watched the Kasari parade go by. He nodded at Torvan. Torvan did not nod back. The barracks were designed for a dozen species that had almost nothing in common except the shared delusion that they were each the galaxy's most important contribution to the coalition. The Kasari requested reinforced bunks. The Velith needed low-spectrum lighting during their sleep cycle, or their bioluminescence would cycle all night and keep everyone awake. The Rethki needed humidity controls. The Tarani needed wider doorframes. The humans requested nothing. Silly noticed this. It was the defining trait of her species. The Velith didn't survive by fighting. They survived by watching. Every micro-shift in posture, every involuntary twitch of muscle, every flicker of intent that crossed a face before the conscious mind caught up. Silly read it all the way other species read text. She read the humans and got very little. The two quiet ones moved through the barracks with an ease that could have been confidence or could have been stupidity. The tall one, Garza, his name tag said, did something as he entered the room that Silly almost missed. He looked at the exits. Not the bunks, not the other cadets. The exits, both of them. He clocked their positions, their widths, and the distance from his assigned bunk to each one. He did this in about 2 seconds, and covered it by stretching his arms overhead, like he was loosening up after the shuttle ride. Silly's bioluminescence shifted to a pale yellow she associated with the word interesting. The welcome briefing was held in a hall big enough to hold all of them, which meant it was very big. Commandant Drail stood at the front. Tarani, old, built like a boulder someone had taught to talk. He had run Ganymede Station Academy for 31 years, and had the particular calm of someone who had seen every kind of arrogance walk through his doors, and was no longer impressed by any of it. "You are the 14th Combined Species Cadet Class," he said. His voice carried without amplification. "You are here to learn how to fight beside species you do not understand. The first step is learning how they fight at all." He explained the module structure. Each species would demonstrate its native combat doctrine over the coming weeks. The cadets would observe, train in cross-species fundamentals, and by graduation, operate as integrated units. It was clean and logical, and everyone in the room was already ranking the other species by threat level instead of listening. "Earth's combat module is scheduled last," Drell said. "Your instructor is Lena Cook." He gestured toward the back of the hall. A woman stood there. 5'6", cropped dark hair, standard training clothes, no rank insignia, no decoration. She had a face that was hard to read in the way a locked door is hard to read. Not because there was nothing behind it, but because whatever was behind it had been deliberately shut. She looked at the room full of alien cadets. The room full of alien cadets looked at her. A Kasari in the third row leaned to his companion and said something that didn't translate, but clearly meant, "This is a joke." Lena Cook said nothing. She left before the question started. That evening, the common area became what common areas always become when you put 100 young soldiers in a room together. Loud, competitive, and full of terrible opinions. A Kasari cadet named Ven pulled up a public access video file on the wall display. Earth. Military training. The footage showed humans running in lines through mud. Humans doing push-ups in the rain. Humans crawling under wire on their stomachs while other humans shouted at them. Humans climbing walls made of wood. Wood. In an age of quantum-forged alloys, the humans were training on dead trees. The room erupted. The Rethki clicked in what Silly recognized as their laughter pattern. A Tarani cadet shook his head with something close to pity. Then replayed the push-up sequence 3 times, because it was apparently the funniest thing he had ever seen. A species that couldn't even hold its own body weight up without visible strain. Torvan stood at the back. He watched the footage with his upper arms crossed and his lower arms resting at his sides. He did not laugh right away. He watched the humans in the video struggling through an obstacle course that any Kesari child could have completed during a nap. and he felt something that was not quite contempt, but lived in the same neighborhood. "This is what they consider preparation for war?" he said. The room laughed harder. Nico Garza was in the room. He was sitting in a corner, eating another apple. The man seemed to have an endless supply, and he did not look up from it, did not defend his species, or their mud-crawling training, or their dead tree obstacle courses. He just ate his apple and let the laughter roll over him like weather. Silly watched him not react, and her bioluminescence shifted again. Not yellow this time. Something deeper, a color she associated with the space between knowing and understanding. Later, alone in her bunk with the lights at Velith low, Silly pulled up Lena Cook's Academy file on her datapad. Most of it was blacked out. Not classified in the normal way, not the "you don't have clearance" kind of redaction. This was the "someone decided the information itself was a problem" kind. Entire sections erased. Combat deployment entries that should have contained mission summaries, unit compositions, engagement reports, and after-action reviews instead contained 2 words each. Cygnus 4. Velden Reach. That was all. Just names of places. No details about what happened there. No record of who went with her. No record of who came back. Then a long gap in the file. 2 years of nothing. Then this teaching assignment. Silly stared at the screen. Her bioluminescence cycled through 3 colors, settled on a 4th she had never seen on herself before, and stayed there. She turned off the datapad and lay in the dark and did not sleep for a long time.